Hi folks, my name is Adam and I like to make questionable artistic choices. The most recent of those being my decision to combine my wall of flesh with a seasonally appropriate, biblically accurate angel, leading to the birth of my biblically inaccurate wall of flesh angel. Though in the interest of being entirely upfront, the real reason I'm making it a pale fleshy winged orb is because when I was restocking my clay shelves, I intended on ordering one package of the Fairy Light pink clay, and I accidentally ordered 10, so I've got a bit of a surplus. However, in the interest of not using the entirety of my clay to build up the body of this beautiful monstrosity, I'm going to make a rust-proof aluminium core first that I can then cover in a nice thin layer of my clay. Originally, I'd wanted to keep the weight to a minimum since the plan was to hang this little Christmas miracle on my Christmas tree, but I encountered two minor problems. One, I don't actually have a Christmas tree to hang this off of, and two, my non-platonic roommate said in no uncertain terms that it's either her or my angel this Christmas, but not both, so maybe I can just leave it at a friend's house and see if they notice. For now though, it's time to add some eyeballs and teeth. Actually, before I do that, I should probably stick some wings into the sides so I know where my eyeballs go. I'll jam a couple wonky loops of armature wire into the sides of the sphere, then I can start marking out the location of my various mouths. Much like the wall of flesh, I figured I'd just have lots of lopsided mouths all over the place of varying shapes and sizes, and once I've got an adequate number of toothless holes, I can start placing my eyeballs by marking out the size of each eye, then deforming the spot with a ball stylus so I can fit the eyeball neatly into a perfectly sized eye hole. I'll then repeat this process just a whole bunch of times with just a whole bunch of oddly shaped eyeballs until I've got a pretty even coverage. Then I can work my way around the sphere, adding little wormy dealies to each of the eyeballs to create the eyelids and ocular orifices. Some of these will be perfectly round sphincters, while others will be the two-part top and bottom lids you're probably more comfortable with. Comfort, of course, being my top priority with this particular project. Once I've got each of the eye orifices wormed up, I can start the slow and methodical process of blending and smoothing the added wormy sausages into the pre-existing fleshy surface before coming back with a soft silicone tool to press the lids back off the eye, leaving each eye with a nice sharp edge. With that done, I can add a bit more surface detail and add some initial larger wrinkling and skin deformation before finally gently pressing a number of the oversized eye sausages into themselves to create a second set of eyelids. Otherwise, with the eyes dotted, I can get on to adding the teeth. With the last of the teeth in place, it's time to add some final surface textures, which I'll do by adding some slightly deeper grooves in and around the mouth and eyes, then work my way around the sphere, adding shallower wrinkles and folds and creases and whatnot. I can then mount it on my custom sphere mount before breaking out my bacon bond, which will add that last bit of fleshy texture. Bacon bond is basically just liquid clay that hardens in the oven, but by gently pressing it onto the surface with a nitrile glove, I can impart a teeny tiny bit of bumpy texture to the surface that I think really elevates this otherwise flat and boring creation. Otherwise, once the body's been adequately poked and prodded, I can bake it to lock it before getting to work building up the wings. And of course, these wings aren't just going to be wings, they're going to be hands, because of course they are. To make my oversized hands into wings, I need to add some wing fingers or wingers in the interest of combining words unnecessarily, which I'll do by wrapping some lengths of armature wire around my pre-installed knobbly metal nubs and filling the spaces with some more aluminium foil. I'll wrap the fingers in some more wire, which will give the subsequent clay layer something to hold on to, and I can repeat this process for the other hand, creating a sort of nightmarish attempt at a lionfish. Then it's just a case of wrapping the all-metal wingers in a layer of clay until all the shiny bits are completely covered, at which point I can start to refine the shape of the hand using my own hands as a reference in case I forgot what a hand looks like. Actually, to be fair, this is pretty good practice when it comes to making anything, since your memory isn't very good when it comes to the human body, and trying to create anatomy from memory usually results in some pretty unsettling results. For instance, the center orb of this particular creation was really just my first attempt at a self-portrait without using reference material, but after the 4th or 5th eye, it was starting to lose something, so I just pivoted into a different direction. Eventually, I've built up enough of my hand that I can start to add the detail, like the wrinkles and folds in the fingers, as well as the bones and tendons on the back of the hand. Once I've worked my way around the hand, making sure that I've got just enough detail to make it obvious that I'm trying, but not too much detail to make it apparent that I don't actually know what I'm doing, I can repeat this entire process on the other side to create the other hand wing. Finally, I'll fit a couple big eyeballs directly into the center of each hand, since my understanding of Bible-accurate angels implies that there are just eyeballs everywhere. These eyeballs get the same wrinkles and eyelids as the eyeballs on the center sphere, and I can work my way around the hand, adding some final folds and wrinkles and skin textures to the palms, as well as the backs of the fingers, before adding the ever-important fingernails, since a hand without fingernails is super weird and it was making me feel very uncomfortable. Last but not least, before I bake the body, I'll soak the hand in some isopropyl alcohol to soften the clay so I can press my thumbprint into the print of the angel's thumb, thereby ensuring that if it ever does come to life and commit crime, I'll be liable. And last but not least, again, I decided some of the mouths needed tongues, so I added those in. Otherwise, that's this beautiful Christmas miracle ready for a final bake and a bit of coloring. I'll start by mixing up a super thin red wash that I can apply to the eyes, adding some red-rimmed eyelids and surrounding wrinkles, as well as along the lips and teeth and inside the mouths, wiping away any of the excess with my finger to create some nice smooth blends. Once I've got all the eyes and mouths appropriately red-rimmed, I can do the same to the fingernails and knuckles, but with a watery brown wash, which I'll then flick onto the backs of the hands to add some speckling by mopping it up with a sponge. With the reds and browns added, I'll then work my way around the body, sponging lighter shades of pink haphazardly around the body to break up the monotony of the single pink shade and highlighting all the little bumps and raised bits, before using my airbrush to add a very thin, translucent layer of darker tanned leather to bring all the colors together in a slightly more natural tone. Mostly I'm just looking at my own skin tone and trying to recreate that. Finally, to add a little shine and make this monstrosity look like it's sweating just a little bit, I'll coat the entire surface in a thin layer of satin varnish. While I got the airbrush out, I'll add a little white to the cup and blast the interior of each eye to bring back the bright white, and to mark out each of the irises, I'll dip some little clay circle cutters in a bit of black paint and press those into each eyeball. I can then use these as the outline for each iris to add some solid base tones to each of the eyeballs, before coming back around with a bunch of lazily mixed up extra tones to make each eye beautiful and uniquely colored. To make the pupils, I've dipped a cotton bud in a bit more black paint, which will let me create some not quite perfect circles in the center of each iris, thereby finishing off each eyeball. I made the teeth using some translucent clay, but baked it at too high a temperature so the teeth yellowed a bit more than I would have liked, so I'll add a bit more white to the tip of each tooth with a white wash, and I'll add some subsurface veins by applying some streaks along the surface with an incredibly thin, barely visible blue wash. When this wash dries, you'll only just be able to make out the veins beneath. I'll then add some high gloss varnish to the mouths to make them nice and wet, and while I would normally use UV resin on the eyeballs, there's just too many of them to make that feasible, so I'll add a couple coats of high gloss varnish and call it good. At this point, I know I won't be able to add this to our non-existent tree, but I want it to be flying, so I'll drill a little hole into the bottom so I can mount it on a little acrylic rod that is absolutely not fit for purpose. Instead, I'll remove the clear rod and replace it with a decidedly more sturdy dowel and some plywood that I can paint later. For now, there's only one final step to bring this tragic tale to a close, and that's the addition of some static grass that, for all intents and purposes, kinda looks like hair. I'll poke some teeny tiny pores into the surface of my majestic Christmas angel and fill them with individual strands of static grass hairs with a little bit of super glue, working my way around the sphere, adding just enough hair to give my fleshy sphere a bit too much tactile feel. Otherwise, with that done, we're all finished here and on to the glamour shots. As always, a big old thank you to those fine folk over on Patreon, and a special hey how are you to the newest of them. Have a nice Yule, Ash, and Alder. Nika is the best. Stephen and Oscar, my fellow sculptors, happy Christmas. Stian Husburn, Kat Anderson, The Art Neurotic, I think Lebby is really smelly, and those Jenkins boys who laugh at my itchy balls. This will be my last video of the year, unless I decide it's not, so happy 2024, or I mean, if it isn't my last video of the year, then happy 2024 regardless, but otherwise we'll see you next year. Cheers.